Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night. And I always got to do this opening in my Jack Nicholson voice because that's what I got to do. It's just the way it goes. I'm trying to figure out why the hell Mark's calling himself Mr. Brenda. Did I miss some memo?
It's a joke between him and my wife against me.
Against you.
I'm like, what the hell is happening? It's fine.
It's a long-standing joke, too. Mark and I met 10 or 11 years ago.
Yeah, Brenda's a super nice lady. I like her. It's just fun.
And she's also a prankster.
They call me Jeffrina.
Jeffrina?
Yeah, Jeffrina. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I was supposed to be called Deanna, but I came out and I was a dude, so it didn't happen. I could have been Deanna. But anyway, let's do this. Next week's Preston Dennett. I've been having teeth issues, which I never have. And last night I had bleeding continuously from I don't know, I guess it's plaque or something that's built up that came off and now it's bleeding. So I have to go to the dentist. I haven't been in many moons, but I can still talk. Luckily for everyone, I guess, sort of. And it's good that we have Wham here, Mark Eddy, and Rick Osmon. Great to have you here, Rick. Great to have you here, Wham. Great to have Mark here. And
I'm looking forward to the next 2 hours.
Me too. I'm pumped up. And I may have to turn this fan off behind me. Do you hear a fan noise? Yeah,
not really.
But anywho, it was cold in Florida, and then it's weird when it doesn't snow here ever, and you see that they say it's going to, and you're like, that's bullshit. That ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna snow in Florida. Well, it happened. Now it's 80. I hate it. I want the snow back. Luckily, I'm up in Graceville near Panama City Beach in Dothan and Georgia, Alabama and Georgia, so we get colder weather. Thank Jesus Christ that the weather gets cold here because I'd die.
The last time I was there in about, I think it was 1999, there was a 360-foot freighter in the Walmart parking lot after a hurricane.
Wow.
Yeah.
I went through Michael. God, it sucked. And then luckily all those recent ones missed me by the skin of the teeth, pretty much. But, I love these subjects. It's just retaining the knowledge and learning about it. And it's complex. Like books about this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, God. It's a hard read for me. I guess a lot of it's memory kind of stuff for me, just remembering the details. I have been watching Ancient Apocalypse, and that was pretty good with Graham Hancock on Netflix. So Keanu's in there, so you got to watch that second season. But I find that, yeah. What do you think about it? You think it's bunk or you like it?
The topic, the subject matter that Graham covers, and the methods that he used in covering it, I support 100%. I'm not sure just how much of the ayahuasca he has consumed, but I'm pretty sure he has enjoyed every single event.
Yeah, I'm sure him and Keanu are tripping out right now probably on it. Oh, man, look at that.
Maybe not. I'm not going to speculate on that part. But as far as some ancient civilization having been on Earth 13,000 years ago, give or take, yes, I am convinced that a civilization existed. Now, I'm not going to say that it was the Vimana of the Vedas. I don't know about the flying cities thing, but I am convinced that they had the capability to sail across the oceans, had the capability to navigate by the stars, which we still do. It's just, and you can do it virtually without any tools, but you do have to have an almanac of where the stars are expected to be. And if you can do that, then you can find your way anywhere on Earth to within about a quarter of a degree, which at the equator is 15 miles.
Didn't in the first season it seemed like he was kind of going giant overboard with giants, and then he kind of got rid of it. It kind of seemed like he was showing a lot of weird giant stuff. Now that's not even mentioned hardly in the second season. But I mean, I don't know how I feel. I don't necessarily agree about giants this or giants that. There may be something to it, but it seemed like the first season he was kind of going giant happy.
Well, part of that has to do with the size of the artifacts that are still around from that period of time. So, step risers, 22 inches. That's not our size. that's some giant's size of climbing steps. When we get a 10-inch riser, it seems pretty tall, especially for an old man like me. But if you're in Central America or South America and those steps are 22 inches tall each, climbing to the top is more than just a little outing.
So, what was the pivot point for your journey into these subjects? How did that come about? When did that start?
Well, it started when I was about 14. I had already been interested in history and had been participating in county historical societies here in Daviess County, Indiana, and Knox County, Indiana. And I became acquainted with old geezers, people about my age now, who had retained not only a knowledge, but also some of the old history books. And they told me about a string of fortresses, a line of fortresses that crossed Indiana in the old days, and that there were 10 or 12, depending on which old geezer I was talking about, and they were pretty much in a straight line across the state. And when I was 13, 14 years old, I thought they were just full of crap. But then I got to doing my own research along that line, and I found that the two that they told me about that were the anchor points, one on the Wabash River and one on the Ohio River, I found them in the Indiana Historical Society records, that they had been archaeologically excavated, described, measured, tooth, dotted I's, crossed T's. And I said, well, okay, that's great, but what about the rest of them? I couldn't find any entry for the rest of them. So I started looking for myself, and I got a bright idea. I wrote an article for Ancient American Magazine. Mark's going to hold that one up, I think, in just a minute. And in it, I described these two fortresses, and if there were any readers who knew of a similar set of circumstances, that the terrain was a certain way, it was in a certain distance of other features, et cetera, things mostly applied to military placement of fortresses, and one reader did. And when I got to looking, I put a ruler over a map of Indiana with the two that I knew where they were, and it crossed right over a line where this new one was. So I should have just done that in the first place, just put a ruler across the map. Since then, I've found three. I can't really make it out, Mark. Yes, yeah, I think it is.
Okay, I get pixelated by the fossil fish head.
So
if I hold any closer.
Eventually, I got to the point of, if I just put a ruler over the map and look for navigable waterways, navigable with a canoe or a kayak, I'm going to find where they were, and that's where I found the next three. So always around a bend of a river. So the ancients were very adept at this kind of stuff.
Who are the ancients?
Whoever built these fortresses. I'm not, there are so many possibilities of who these people were, but then there's also the possibility of when, because it could have been reused and reused and reused by different cultures on down the line. Rome, for instance, if you look at Rome, it's been occupied by 17 different types of government. So, but it's still Rome. Who were the people?
So you're, the maps that I showed the viewers in your book, the graves of the Golden Bear. You have them, like going across a state in a straight line. You've written about, placed along the river. Or how are these places being used by the different occupants?
Well, I think they served multiple purposes. One of the criteria I put forth in that article was they needed to be about a 1 day's march apart for light infantry. And that depends a lot on terrain. But they also had to be next to the navigable waterway. So this makes it a military approach to something. And all military thrives on its communication skills. It doesn't matter as much how good fighters they are as how well they communicate with their commanders and such. It helps to win. But it's more important to talk to your army. So my contention is, in studying this big line of fortresses, which are in a pretty much straight line, is that they, being high terrain up on top of hills or up on top of mounds, they function as a network of line of sight communications nodes, if you will. And in the book, I talked about how in the old world, they had this method, heliography it's called, and they used mirrors in the daytime, or they used louvered lanterns at night. And they had a 5x5 matrix that they used either the Latin or the Greek alphabet to conduct text messaging at night or in the daytime with just light signals. And that was written about by Polybius, who was in the house of Scipio Africanus as a hostage because Polybius's father was a petty king in one of the Greek kingdoms. Long story there. Anyway, Polybius wrote the only surviving account of the siege of Carthage and described using this signaling method as part of the campaign. So in the New World, there are all kinds of places and artifacts that indicate they used a similar type of technology. They did not use the same software, if you will, ma'am, because they didn't use an alphabet. They used a syllabary instead. So where in the old world you had a 5x5 matrix, in the New World you had a 5x5 matrix. So you had 125 possibilities instead of 25 possibilities. And they had stations about every 10 miles. If you go to the Yucatan and you look at the LIDAR where all these little, I shouldn't say little, all these pyramids are, they're almost exactly on 10 mile by 10 mile grids.
So this line of sight communication was going from Indiana to Mexico, east coast to Mexico, across the continent.
Yes, I'll just short answer yes. And I don't have all the stations picked out, but I can make you a contiguous line going. I started out in your neck of the woods, Mark. Grave Creek Mound, one of the tallest mounds out there, is on a line of sight matrix that goes from Cahokia all the way to the East Coast at Plymouth Rock, incidentally. And it goes across, goes from New Jersey shore to Long Island, from Long Island to Block Island, and from Block Island to Newport Tower, and then on up to Plymouth Rock. Anyway, so all the mounds and hilltops that are modified are in that line, and I've drawn that line in the book too, but it's going to be really hard to make out. The U.S. Army did a similar experiment one time while they were chasing Geronimo. and they had telephone line, telegraph line, and heliograph set up across I think it was a 482-mile run, and they sent a text message by all three methods. Of course, voice for the telephone, and the heliograph came back last, but complete with no errors, and the telegraph had 2 errors. So 4 hours for the entire thing on a 300-page text, 300-word text.
It, Rick, since you just brought up the Newport Tower, people who might be interested in getting a copy of your book. Scott Walter wrote the foreword to your book. What he's spoken about the Newport Tower and all the he's written about it as well, with all the different the egg and the alignments. What role did the Templars play in eventually establishing their influence on this continent?
Well, I have one of those out of the ballpark hypotheses on this, and it is this. The Templars learned about North America and all its wonders from a treasure they found in Petra. Because when they were in Petra, they found something that enumerated all the treasures available in North America, and possibly one that had already been here when they got here. And I drew from that it would have been probably from an ancient Roman dude who had been the governor of Arabia Petraeus, had been appointed that in 143 AD. The last time anybody had heard of this dude was in 117 AD, when the Ninth Roman Legion disappeared, and him with it. But he reappears 25 years later as the governor of Arabia Petraeus. And my contention, my assertion, my research is that he was probably the last surviving officer of the Ninth Legion, Hispania, to return from North America. But they just simply, the Ninth Legion simply disappears from history. They weren't disbanded, they weren't conquered, or anything that would show up in history, except for this guy. And he became the governor of Arabia Petraeus, and his governor's palace and treasury were in that edifice that you see in the scene in Indiana Jones and the
Last
Holy Grail.
Crusade?
Yeah, Last Crusader, yeah. So they, the Templars, were chasing an already ancient story. That's what I'm speculating. And they spent a lot of time looking for that ancient treasure. They may have been looking at Oak Island instead of hiding at Oak Island.
Cool stuff. Okay, and while we're you're talking about that early, very early medieval time period, crossover from Rome to the early medieval period. You're also incorporating some of the other legends a little later, few centuries later into the Middle Ages.
Prince Madoc.
Saint Brendan. I think it.
I would call that the beginning of the Dark Ages, actually. But
it makes for a fascinating read, where once you start weaving together all the different stories
that were almost simultaneous.
Yeah. So how often were people, coming back and forth across the Atlantic? Why? What were the But that's jumping too far ahead. If you just want to summarize what Saint Brendan and Prince Madoc were doing.
Sure. Two different voyages at two different times, but let's start with Prince Madoc. Prince Madoc, not the one from 1170, but the one from, in this case, 536 AD, was the admiral of the seas for the Welsh Navy. They called themselves Cymru, and the country Cymru. And he and the fleet were at sea when an extraterrestrial impactor event occurred and threw the northern hemisphere into the Dark Ages, literally, not because they couldn't read or write, because they couldn't see. It threw up a cloud into the atmosphere that truly ended summer for about 3 years, and it impacted climate for another couple hundred years. Anyway, Madoc and the fleet were blown westward, ended up in North America. The survivors rebuilt a fleet enough to carry them back to Britain. And when they got there, Madoc's half-brother, the then king, Arthur II, he was fighting famine and rebellion and everything else at that time. And Madoc said, hey, it's green and nice over there. So they sent a different admiral with a small fleet to go explore. And he came back and said, sure enough, there's something over there. So they packed up, depends on which part of the history of which book of the Chronicles you're asking, but 700 ships, 1,100 ships, 70,000 people, and they went west. Arthur made it for about a year before he got pelted with arrows and died. And they, being Madoc and some of the other royals, desiccated his body wrapped in two deerskins, sewn into two deerskins, desiccated his body for 2 years before going back to Britain with the body. And the climate was starting to return. And when they got there, they found that the air was not yet ready, was 2 years shy of being ready to lead. So there was a regent ruling, and they didn't trust him, didn't like him. So they didn't inform him that Arthur was dead for 2 more years, put his body in a different cave for 2 more years until the heir came of age. So that's one bunch. Then St. Brendan, and that would have been 572 when they returned him to Britain. St. Brendan was, I believe, 596. I'd have to go look at the actual dates. He and a group of monks boarded a leather-covered oak frame boat and sailed westward, went past Iceland, described everything they saw there, went past Greenland, described what they saw there. North America, 1 year, give or take. Some of them stayed, the rest of them went back and recorded it. So the some that stayed probably are the ones who in Wyoming County, West Virginia, left Irish Oga messages carved into a cliff face, and the skull found nearby dates right and DNA's right. So there were a whole bunch of crossings. Much earlier, probably, the Carthaginians did business in North America. Before that, probably almost certainly the Minoans, the Chinese, a few others. But you won't find any of that in current history books. Just in off the wall publications like the one he's got there.
But you include artwork. Okay, that's about as close. Like,
oh, okay. Is that
okay,
the Stoke Dry
yeah.
mural?
Okay, so what?
The mural at Stoke Dry.
Yeah.
The Stoke Dry is a small town in northwest England, and they were repairing walls. 18 something, and they started stripping off whitewash, and they found this mural, or part of it. They destroyed a lot of it, but they salvaged it, and it shows a figure, a royal figure, with a fleur-de-lis. He's stripped to the waist. He's stuck with, I don't know, 20 arrows, give or take, and tied to a post. And the people shooting the arrows into him are reddish colored skin and wearing feathered headdresses and loincloths. So the historians say, "Oh well, that's King Edmund, and he was martyred on Christmas Day, whatever it was, 1199." And I'm thinking, no, I don't think so. Not even the Danes are going to wear loincloths on Christmas Day in England. And no, not even the Danes are that crazy. It's portraying something else entirely. And I think it was King Arthur meeting his demise.
And you just said King Arthur. Did I hear that right? Like King
Yes.
Arthur? Like
King Arthur II.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were two King Arthurs about 130 years apart, great-grandson or great-great-grandson kind of deal. And the first one was born in early years spent at a place called Tintagel. Tintagel, I don't know how you pronounce it. And it's on the very west coast of the British Isles, and basically in Cornwall. And they did an archaeological excavation there back in the 1960s, and they found a piece of slate with some writing on it in the hand of what looked like a 3-year-old trying to learn to sign his name, and it said Arcturus. And it made the character, which is on the cover of that book he's got in his hand.
So what do you think about the original King Arthur? How close is that story with the knights and all that stuff? Is there's a lot of inconsistencies with that, right? There was a real person that was based on too, wasn't it?
It was based on 2 or 3 real people. But the King Arthur that you read about was written by French novelists. So it's not an historical account. It's a romantic account based on some real characters, yeah. So it's romanticized a lot. It's the Lord of the Rings version.
I know. I start thinking about Excalibur, the John Borman movie, which is one of my favorite movies. Like, as it's already seeing the scenes go through my head and everything. We're talking about it.
Well,
It's a
that's
good one.
another interesting thing I found in this research is that the sword in the stone may actually be a sword rendered in stone, like a picture of a sword or a statue of a stone sword. And it was found by the authors who chased all this down, Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett. And I'm just secondhand reporting it. But they found this stone sword in a St. Peter's church in Britain. And word got out, and somebody tried to go break it up, bust it up, destroy it, or capture the magic or whatever they were going to do. But Wilson and Blackett managed to rescue it from that, and it is now safely away from there and in safe hands, whatever that means.
Any Merlin facts, or is that a fictitious character? Like, anything come up on Merlin?
As a fictitious character, a lot comes up on Merlin. A couple of really good TV series, even. But at Tintagel, there is a cave at the base of the cliff, right at the waterline, and it's called Merlin's Cave. And it has archaeological evidence of somebody having lived in it for a very long time. That's as close as I can get to a real Merlin.
Definitely fascinating. Go ahead, Mark. What are you going to say?
So, no, okay. Rick, if people are enjoying what you're discussing, and who wouldn't, but you have a updated Oopa Loopa Cafe. What is going on with your new TV series? Or are you covering a lot of this ancient history? What's the story with your new TV show?
What's
Okay.
Oompa Loompa? Wait, just Oompa Loompa Cafe. Did I hear that right? What is that?
Out of place
Oopa Loopa.
artifacts.
It's acronym for out of place artifact and large out of place artifact.
Okay.
And no little orange haired people.
I know. I was like, what? Okay, I gotcha.
But I did a show, I don't know, 350 or so content hours. And it was entitled the Oopa Loopa Cafe. And we concentrated mostly on out of place artifacts and, the bizarre history that just can't quite be the way they teach it. And so I did, I don't know, 300 plus hours of audio on Blog Talk Radio and a couple other platforms. And then I did, I don't know how many weeks of 2 hours a day of live television for the Oopa Loopa Cafe on a cable station, like that killed me. But it was fun. And it kind of broke me for a while. But then I was also started writing for Ancient American Magazine. I got, I think, 25 feature articles, 3 or 4 cover articles. And there will be news about that at some point. But now I'm on a different venture, and we're calling it Lost America. And we've been so far in 19 states, about 120 different sites, with truly best in the business Hollywood camera guys, folks. And we've got best in the business editors doing things for us. And we have 4 episodes currently for sale on Amazon Prime, Lost America. And they are close to home for me because we just, wanted to start out with almost no travel budget. So we have 2 episodes in Southern Illinois. Mark, you remember Mark Motzinger. Mark Motzinger is an expert in the stone fortresses across Southern Illinois. And he's also close enough to be a historical expert on a couple of other features in the area. Pardon me. So he's the star of the first 2 episodes. And then we're back in Indiana for my neck of the woods. And we do Vincennes, Indiana. Pardon me, frog in my throat. And the mounds and history there, and then down to Angel Mounds by Evansville. And it's hard to imagine you can pack all that much knowledge into a 45-minute episode, but it just gets intense. Pay attention, it's fast. So that's what we're doing with the TV show. And they're priced cheap enough. Each episode's cheaper than a candy bar.
So are they like a rental on Amazon?
No, you buy it.
Oh.
Buy it for $1.99. Or if you want the high def version, I think they're $2.99.
Are you the host on all of them, or just
most of them? Yeah, it's we've had more than one crew operating at a time, in fact. So yeah, like I said, 19 states. We talk to experts, we talk to natives, we talk to people on the street if they're interested. We go into museums, we go into state parks, we go up on private property mountains and do the whole line of sight thing from other people's places. Yeah, we've been pretty much everywhere. National parks.
Are you dealing with mostly just the property owners, or are there some like bigger names in the research community, like your name, or is just pretty just the regular people who are doing most of the talking?
Well, I you might have noticed I do like to talk, but Mark Motzinger talks the most in Southern Illinois. I talk the most in Southern Indiana. When we get up into Wisconsin, it'll be Jim Shears or Richie Brown, or the people that are familiar with that area and can tell us all of the ins and outs. So when we went to the Putnam Museum, for instance, Davenport, Iowa, we got to see firsthand some of the more contentious artifacts that they have in their stacks. They don't keep them on display. They intend to redisplay them, I think, next year. But even the things that have been called hoaxes for 150 years, they don't throw them away. So we go look, we talk to the people who keep them safe and whatnot.
How's getting access to filming the contentious artifacts?
If you ask nicely and tell them what you intend to do, and you don't rake them over the coals about it, they're okay. And treat them like like they own it, because they do. And the people, the curators, the managers, the administrators at these museums, they're not the archaeologists. They have the item. They didn't study it. They have what the archaeologists told them about the item. And we've been in several museums like that. And it's a very interesting community from that side, because if you want to keep an accreditation for your museum, you have to do things according to the accreditation association, board, administration, and it's actually an ongoing thing. It's they have to reaccredit. I think it's every 10 years, and it's not a small task. But if they have these items that were valued by the people who found them, people who displayed them before there was an accreditation administration, then there is provision in there for them to keep them and just to say, look, it's always been considered a hoax, but here it is. So when we found some things in Chillicothe, Ohio, that were never considered to be a hoax, just unknown purpose, that's in the segment. But you go into these museums, you tell them what you're doing ahead of time. You don't just show up with a camera and bust in.
Mhm. Make an
You don't get
appointment.
anywhere like that. Pardon?
Make an appointment.
Yes, certainly. And most of the times we do have to do that weeks in ahead,
Mhm.
several weeks in advance. And filming in state parks, same thing. Some places, Georgia in particular, don't even think about running a drone. It's not going to happen in this lifetime. Illinois, same, unless you're ahead of the game with contacts and whatnot, which we've been fortunate that way.
What are the problems with drones? Like too much information from beyond ground level?
Well, it's tempting to think that for sure, but mostly it's a safety issue.
Okay.
And you do not want me piloting that drone in any situation if you're on the ground underneath it. Just believe me, you don't want me piloting that. But
Yeah,
nowadays, you just tell it where to go. You don't even fly it yourself. You just tell it where you want it to go.
they they can just zip from take off right over your head to out of sight in just a few seconds.
Yes.
They do move pretty quickly, and also a guy using one, he has his little TV on the ground, and you couldn't even see the drone, but you could see it tell that he was coming back towards us, and then all of a sudden, you can actually see it get a few hundred yards away. They are moving at a nice clip. The advantages that they offer is just really amazing.
They are. And the technologies that they can carry are pretty amazing too. You can buy them now, have your own LiDAR right there. Boom. You can have
Clear photos.
Oh, yeah. Almost anything you can imagine can be carried.
And go ahead.
I got started in this with satellite imagery. So I get to sit at the desk and get the views I need. But except for the line of sight, you pretty much just have to go out and see it to appreciate how easy it was, how vast the network could be too. But
it's interesting. A lot of these shows that use that kind of stuff now, the drones and watching it and stuff, especially those Skinwalker Ranch shows. That's nuts. Don't want to get into that too heavily because I talk about it too much. But the biggest thing about that is the technology and how something's interfering with it. And then the weirdest stuff is there's so many government spooks on those shows. That's what makes it even more creepier, more than the paranormal phenomenon. Like there's crazy spooks on that show. Former CIA analyst, Bigelow Aerospace. Like it's just nuts. They're like, what the hell's happening with this show? But I guess my question is, with all this stuff you're studying and doing with the drones, what's some of the weirdest stuff you've come across in your studies? Like some weird stuff.
Well, a beat frequency, what would you call that? Unknown audio source, kind of like the one at Skinwalker, except I figured out what that was, by the way.
What was
and
it?
it's basically the same thing that Lee Pennington encountered at Fort Mountain in Georgia. A regular audio blip in the audio track of what he was intentionally filming, and he couldn't find a source. But in both cases, you're in the sweep area of a radar set. And in the case of Skinwalker, it's beating off of the frequency from the radio station.
So you think it's just picking up some feedback, so to speak? They're acting like it's some kind of thing at every place and all this stuff, and it's after their technology. And I'm like, is it China?
Yeah, you don't have to look that far, but you do have to kind of define what's going on around you. And at Fort Mountain, it's right there by the Marietta Naval Air Station. So
yeah, and
surface search radars.
Yeah, it's weird with those shows. I mean, now they're going to other ranches and saying similar phenomenon's happening. And then they had that Chris Bledsoe guy. They brought him out in like an X-Men thing, summoning UFOs with Colonel John Alexander. That was some weird shit. You're like, what the hell's happening with this? This is getting weird. But see,
the night vision images of the UFOs jumping around in the atmosphere or just outside the atmosphere, that is some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Rick, as I've been, working on a writing project, I've had to deal with a number of museums. Obviously, the backdrop I have, which for some reason I can't change it, but most people are making fun of it, which can be a good thing. But so many museums, at least the ones I've been dealing with, have been so appreciative that you are showing interest in some aspect of their collection. I've had people say that we can take like an article or whatever the author gleaned from a visit here to their board of directors and say, look, we are doing outreach to historians. They might be able to improve the funding that they are getting. Not every museum is raking in money like the Louvre because everyone wants to see the Mona Lisa. They have a lot of having a rough time making ends meet too, but I've encountered so many who will bend over backwards to help you to get the photo you want, just as long as you give them credit. And
right.
Yeah, it's really nice working with them. I've just encountered so many who are super appreciative of expressing an interest in the local history.
Yeah, and they're helpful.
Yes.
As long as you, and even more so if you can find someone who is doing it voluntarily. So, and I'm not putting down the professional. Please don't misunderstand that. But the people who do it voluntarily
Hmm.
have done it as a passion for most of their lives.
Right.
and that's why I say I'm now the old geezer that inspired me when I was 14.
Hmm.
So, except I'm a little further afield than a bunch of forts in Indiana.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
That's. Oh, go ahead.
the other thing is in this show, we also strive to do the scientific parts that we can. Obviously, we're not the scientists who do it, but we try to get the results. And one of the things that I'm helping to chase now, kind of outside the show, but kind of connected, we're getting some metallurgical testing done on some raw pieces of Michigan copper, as well as some ancient relics that we think may contain some Michigan copper. And up until about 15 years ago, there was no test that could differentiate copper from uh, wherever in ancient relics. But now we think we have a way of doing it because of the unique nature of Michigan copper. And for the people who don't know what Michigan copper is, in the Upper Peninsula, Keweenaw Peninsula in particular, of Upper Michigan, and on Isle Royal, a little bit on the Canadian side of Lake Superior, a tiny bit over in Wisconsin, is a concentration of pure copper. And I don't mean copper ore. You pick it up off the ground and it is copper. You don't have to uh, refine it. You don't have to smelt it. It's copper. Now you can heat it and beat it, put it into shape. And the old copper culture of that region did that for hundreds of thousands of implements over thousands of years. But somebody removed upwards of 5 million pounds, maybe 500 million pounds of pure copper from those places I mentioned, and we can't find it. And we think it may have gone to the old world in those ancient trade ships and been turned into bronze by the Bell-Beaker people and others. So we're devising a test regime to test that hypothesis.
Okay. That is a new invention. Testing.
Yeah,
Or, I don't know the right word, but you said you couldn't
it's a
do
new
it.
technology,
Okay,
basically.
okay, okay. So it is able to help identify where the copper was mined.
Yes. In the past, they'd always done that by taking the ratio of a couple of lead isotopes. But once, any time that tool or whatever that metal object was, if it had been remelted, recycled, whatever, it starts losing that unique uh, fingerprint, that signature bunch of metals. So the more it's melted, the less likely you are to make that determination. So we're getting some 3,300-year-old artifacts that I think are really close to the source, one in particular. And we're going to measure some aspects of the copper itself, not just the bronze and its alloy, but get down deep into the copper to the number of isotopes it has of one stable isotope versus the other stable isotope, and then compare those numbers to the old world copper sources. And I think we're going to find something markedly different than what anyone else has ever found.
Wow.
But
Okay. So since you just mentioned the UP, can you discuss your work with the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society and Judy and Crystal and all the other people who congregate there once a year?
Sure. Talk about AAPS. I've been associated with AAPS since I think the first time I got up there was 2007. They weren't even called that then. But I have presented at the conference probably 15 times, give or take, since then. And once I've presented from here, but by Zoom to the conference. Thank you, COVID. Anyway, I'm on the board of advisors, and I participated not nearly as heavily as Judy Johnson, several of the other people who have pretty much devoted their lives to it, but I do support it in any way I can. And we are centered around the Michigan copper story, but we also investigate and love the mysteries from pretty much all over the world. We've had Sam Osmon from Bosnian pyramids. We've had several people study the Incan ruins and report back to us. We have one guy who's fairly knowledgeable, was a guide, in fact, for the Gaza and the museum there in Cairo. So AAPS has tons of information every October. The last, I think, 10 years, we've met at a place in Harris, Michigan, called the Island Resort Hotel and Casino. It's owned by the Harris, Hannahville Potawatomi, and great folks, great place. So AAPS is going real strong, and I don't know if you're aware, Mark, but MES just announced that they're closing their doors and they're transferring all of their stuff, treasury and all, to Ancient Kentucky Historical Society, or Historical Association, I should say. And
That's
so sorry to see
Lee's
them
group.
go. Yeah, Lee's group is AKHA, and he was pretty active in MES for a long time, but it was mostly John White, Jim Leslie, a few others at MES. And they kept it going for 25, 30 years, going strong, but it just lost interest and everybody got old. So there are some good possibilities on the horizon for capturing the information that they did have and archiving it. A little premature to name names, but there are some folks working on it.
Okay, and I just threw said Lee's name, without, it's. I know Lee probably, could be someone like Cher. You just know him by. Yes,
It's true.
but
He is that level of personality.
yeah, I should have said Lee Pennington. So, he has a legendary status in his own right. So, since you're bringing up, the ancient
Three
Kentucky,
times nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Yeah, I'd say he's legendary.
Yeah. So, it's transferring from MES to the ancient Kentucky group. It's in good hands. Lee and Joe Baker, very passionate about preserving ancient history. What can you give us a little bit more background on Lee? He's doing uh, pretty regular conferences at his house.
Well, yeah, it's a monthly meeting for the AKHA, and AKHA was founded by mostly Jim Michaels back in the day, but Lee is a surviving founder, I guess would be the most accurate term. Lee is a retired professor of creative writing, University of Kentucky. His late wife Joy was too. His property is an historically important site all by itself. It's an old tavern from the 1830s, Kratz Place. And the AKHA meetings, he can seat 35, 40 people in his house, and they also put it out as a Facebook live event kind of thing. Usually works too. And it concentrated on the whole Prince Madoc, King Arthur stories, how it got started, because a lot of the sites and lore of King Arthur in America were in their area. And the show, our Lost America, we concentrate a couple of episodes around that, because one of the sites, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the anchor points for the line of forts across Indiana, and it's called Devil's Backbone or Rose Island or 14 Mile Creek. It's been called a lot of things, but it was the supposed site that Prince Madoc built a fortress while the survivors of the Welsh foray into North America were resisting annihilation by the natives. Anyway, AKHA started out as trying to preserve and promulgate that knowledge. And Jim spent the last 20 years or so of his life recording all the lore and encapsulating it and getting it across oceans, in fact. And Lee, very recently, just a week ago, was knighted Sir Lee Pennington of the Society of the Red Dragon. I'm probably saying that part wrong, but it's kind of an honorarium title. And he might be the only one who ever got it while he's still alive. But Lee's a hero of mine, if I'm not gushing enough.
And he has records under his belt as well.
Oh yeah, you mean recordings, as in
Yes.
vocals? Yeah, he was a folk singer in the '60s, and he'd stopped doing that for probably 20 years or so. And then when Brenda and I got married, invited him up to the mic because I was playing for my own wedding, and it was just a bunch of my friends and myself. And Lee showed up, and I handed him a guitar and told him to sing, and he did. And he's been doing so pretty much ever since. But he was a pretty well known folk singer in the '60s and '70s in the Kentucky, Tennessee region in particular, like Gatlinburg in particular.
Wow.
What I know you said you went to Georgia and stuff. What came up there? I remember a lot of God, when I was in school, we went to Rock Eagle and things like that there. But that's all I really remember. Jekyll Island and stuff like that. Weird places we went for school. Strange places.
Jekyll Island has its own weird history. Most of it in the 19th or 20th century. But Stone Eagle is an important ceremonial site. I believe it was all ceremonial. Fort Mountain, nobody knows for sure whether it was fortress or ceremonial or some mix thereof. But that's where Lee Pennington was doing video and got this weird beep in the audio track. And I'm pretty sure surface search out of Marietta. But also you have Etowah Mounds, which is an important, very important Mississippian site, right across the Alabama line from the Welsh Caves at Mentone, Alabama. And that has, well, part of an episode all by itself too. Speaking of the whole state parks thing, but you can't take a big, 4K studio style camera into a cave. So that's all hero stuff in there, wearables. But Welsh Cave came up in conversation because, and is part of the video series because it's part of the King Arthur story in America. And I believe, I am convinced, would be a more accurate term, that Welsh Caves has a feature in which his body was desiccated for 2 years and tied into 2 deerskins. And that cave is unique in its properties of, well, desiccation. You'd think any cave in Alabama would have running water through it. This one does not. Bone dry, quite literally. So Welsh Caves is part and parcel of one of the episode 6 coming out shortly, I hope.
So what exactly, just to give everybody a little summary, is the graves of the Golden Bear? I mean, what graves are they? Who's there?
Okay, the Golden Bear is one of the nicknames that is given Prince Madoc. I'm sorry, King Arthur. And the graves would be that one in particular at Welsh Caves. Another one in a cave near the St. Peter's Church I mentioned earlier that Wilson and Blackett found. And then the third one would be wherever he is interred now, which Wilson and Blackett think it's under the floor of that St. Peter's Church. But nobody will ever know for sure, probably.
Definitely fascinating. We had Graham Phillips on about Arthur before, a British dude, but definitely love that stuff. There's just something to it that's powerful. Just, it's kind of like a positive variation. You look at the Vlad the Impaler story, which I love, and we've had some guests on about that, which are not the easiest to find, by the way. We had a guy from Romania with an eye patch for Vlad the Impaler. That was really good, Victor, for you. But I noticed some things too in some of the legendary stories, and I don't know how true they are, but I've seen it in books that they said before King Arthur a comet ran, and then there was also a book that said something similar about Vlad the Impaler, a comet ran. But the things I find the most interesting is some of the dragon and serpent symbology about that, and there's something to that, and earth energy and things like that. It's just fascinating.
Well, and as I mentioned, there was an extraterrestrial impact event right before this Arthur II, decided that England, or it wasn't even England then, it was the British Isles, was not able to sustain itself for some period of time. It's the only time in history that they imported wheat. They weren't able to grow crops after this event. But we have a really good date for that impact event, and it's called 536 AD. But I mentioned that it was 572 when Arthur died. That's because at that time in Britain, they used what we call the Celtic calendar, and it started at the date Christ was crucified, not when he was born. So there's a 33-year difference between the two calendars. Anyway, so that comet leading Arthur, and actually Arthur's death, not his birth, that tracks. So the Red Dragon Society, which Lee Pennington's now a recognized knight, is handed down from one of the ancient Celtic orders when I say Celtic, it's Church of the Chaldees. If I can get a little more specific, Church of the Chaldees was the first church formed in the whole Christendom, and it was formed in Britain, not in Rome or any place else. And the Catholic Encyclopedia will support that statement. So all the kings of Britain at that time were already Christian. They just weren't Catholic Christian, if that helps put a perspective on it.
What was that story with Merlin and dragons and earth energies? Like there's some kind of like weird story where he like sees them or measures them or something. I don't know how factual that is, but I've read so much fantasy crap about Merlin, I'll get it mixed up. But I know there's like some weird story with two dragons in the earth or some kind of energy story or something like that.
Odd you should bring that up, but, and I can't name names again, but there is an experiment currently in the planning stages of entering one of the burial mounds in Ireland with a very similar account, and doing some honest to goodness physics style testing of a phenomenon that's associated with these places. And it has a lot to do with resonant frequencies.
Interesting. Well, I had
In fact,
no
it
idea.
has everything to do with resonant frequencies.
I had no idea about that. So just a stoner that taps into the ether sometimes by accident.
You got a back channel though. That's
Yeah. But yes, definitely interesting. All the stuff about Arthur. God, it's just
well, and it comes from so many different angles and so many different timelines as well, because there's an 1100, 1200 AD Arthur, and then there's the hours in 570s, and then there's another one back in what would that have been, 378 to 421, something like that.
is
Arthur the First.
Is Excalibur by John Boorman? Have you seen that? I'm sure. Is that the best Arthur movie? I think it is. I think that's the best one.
It's most exciting. We can put it that way. As far as historical, we don't really have much.
Yeah.
I'll put it this way: the child pulling the sword from the stone to become king, that did not happen. Let's put it that way. Arthur was born a king.
I had a college history professor say that the Monty Python and the Holy Grail was probably the most historically accurate Arthurian movie with the clothing, some of the outdoor scenes. I was like, that.
Well, yes, actually, that's true, because they did go to the right places, except for the French castle. But
yeah, Castle Stock. Yeah, I actually drove. I was on a bus a couple times. Went by Castle Stalker. It's actually it's out in the middle of nowhere. I just didn't know if they would have let me out if I. It's a long walk to the next town. It was raining, but it was. I was really fascinated by being so close to it. But you also get the cave with the rabbit. That all was
and the holy hand grenade. But
yeah, but it all fits in with so many of the natural features associated with even the 4th, 5th century, 6th century, and you already mentioned the folklore of Merlin's cave under the remains of the Tintagel castle.
Let's go back a little bit, head back to the whole Roman era thing. Roman Britain, if I could be a little more specific. If you ride the tube, the underground railway of Britain, of London, and you get off nearest the London Bridge, then as you come out, you can touch a 2,000-year-old stone wall. that was built by Romans. It was the Londinium Wall. And when you go to York in northeastern England, almost up to Scotland, you'll find a Roman. It started out as a Roman fortress. It was completed in 117. I'm sorry, it was completed in 108 AD, and it was built by the Ninth Roman Legion. And they discovered a plaque that says so. At York, it encloses a 52-acre, I'll call it small farmstead, but it wouldn't have been enough to support an army of 5,500 men, plus all of the camp followers that goes with that. So when the Ninth Roman Legion disappears from history in 117 AD, at the beginning of more or less Hadrian's rule, that's their most recent enumeration is there at York. So by that time, they have been, as a legion, they have lived in Britain for 70 years. So when they sing a song, they have a Welsh accent. When they eat a meal, it tastes like a Welsh meal. When they wear civilian clothing, they look like Welshmen. When they disappear from history, they're going to be speaking more Welsh than they are Latin. And when you get to the Welsh-speaking Indians named the Mandans of supposedly the upper Missouri, then you continue the whole idea of the Welsh colonizers of North America. So that's what that book is about. And we still continue those studies, if you will, in the TV series. Of course, Lee has a lot to say about that.
Lee's a regular contributor or an advisor
of AAPS? Yes, he is. And presenter. In fact, their next, the next AKHA meeting, he's doing his presentation about Burroughs Cave. So, wish I could be there for that one.
It's a controversial topic. What is there any new evidence to confirm its authenticity?
I'm going to go with yes.
Oh, okay.
A couple things. You're aware of a lot of the etched stones that we call Burroughs Cave stones, and there'll be profiles of almost always human figures. Sometimes a little bit strange, but mostly human-looking figures, and in various costumes, various countries, various origins costumes: Egyptian, Macedonian, Roman, Native American, North African, all these different costumings, and a lot of Carthaginian themed images as well as some incredibly accurate map stones of North America. Stones showing images of ships, triremes and biremes, and Phoenician cargo ships, and a couple warships. Star patterns, a little bit of everything on these some 2,700 stones that we know of have been removed from this cave.
Wow.
And
that many?
It's a large number. This isn't somebody doing it in a garage, pretty sure. And in a lot of different materials. There supposedly were a lot of gold objects that were removed from the cave, melted down, but they made castings out of lead. And they were elephant images, and we're talking East Indian elephants, not African elephants, most of them, in a mix together in this one batch of stones. So back to what is new. A guy by the name of Brian Nettles has taken to taken the images, I'll call it syllabary, that is Phoenician, Punic writing, and he's entered it into Google Translate and let Google translate what is found on these stones. And one of them that we're calling the scurvy stone is in 5 stanzas. Of course, read right to left because that's how they did it. And I can't quote it, but I'll paraphrase it. You've got it, all of it. Look at your cognitive abilities. Look at your mouth. You've got all the signs of scurvy. And 5 stanzas, and I think of it just like a bunch of Burma shave signs. You read this one, you read that one, and almost certainly they rhymed at some point because it's an advertisement telling these sailors, Phoenician sailors, they need to eat this product that I'm selling, which is almost certainly water lilies because it's high in vitamin C and it will treat scurvy. And there's a little illustration that shows the plant, water lily. So yeah, that's one. Another one is a corroborative find, if you will, from the City of David Archaeological Park at Jerusalem. And they found a seal, almost certainly either a ring size or possibly a pendant sized seal, wax seal, representing one of David's fighters who is named in the Bible. And when I say fighters, I'm not talking about a soldier. I'm talking about a Hulk Hogan WWE type fighter because they had these. In Rome, they called them gladiators, but it was basically a rich man's sport, and you sponsored your gladiator. But the gladiators had their own contracts for endorsing products. It might be some miracle healing water. It might be some, whatever makes you feel good. But they had these contracts. And my contention is that a lot of the folks that you're seeing portrayed in these stones from Burroughs Cave are these fighters. They're the Muhammad Ali on the Wheaties box kind of athlete. If that makes any sense.
Do you think they were the advertisements were brought across the Atlantic, or they were fashioned on the North American continent?
The stones?
Yes.
I believe they were fashioned here. and a little background, just a little bit of synthesis on all this. Not saying this is what happened. I'm saying this might be what happened. They brought the fighters here to train them in secret, away from all the other fighters, so they won't know their special tricks. And that included, this is how you do your contracts. This is how you want your propaganda done. When you get back, do this, go see this guy, and he'll set you up. Because it was a network, just like WWE is today.
Wow. Like
yeah, I know. Kombat. It sounds pretty far out there, doesn't it?
Mortal Kombat. It's interesting.
Well, it kind of was Mortal Kombat, but it was so rare for a gladiator to be killed in the ring. He usually died of old age or food poisoning.
So how often does Viking stuff come up in your studies? Does that come up a lot? Of course it does.
Well, it depends on whether I'm in Minnesota or not.
Okay.
In Minnesota, it comes up a lot.
Cool.
I'm actually, you can't see it very well. I'm actually wearing runestone.
Nice.
Yeah. Heavener, Oklahoma. They have a great park for the Heavener runestone there. And it's, of course, runic writing. And Mark will know who I'm talking about. There was a lady there who researched this stone from the time she was a teenager until she died. and her name was Gloria Farley. She actually became a degreed archaeologist and argued for its authenticity for what 40 years or so. And she argued for the authenticity of a lot of out of place artifacts as well, and argued eloquently. And I'm sorry I never got to meet or speak with her, but I sure do thank her for all that she did. Her house is still there in Heavener, but we didn't have time to go there. We did a pretty good piece about the stone itself, and in the park, and the not inn, but the Gee Dunk store and the park ranger's office. We had a pretty good interview. It was pouring down rain, but still enjoyed it. Oklahoma is an interesting state all by itself. So is Arkansas. But we went last April on a 11 state run. And it was a full ticket. There wasn't a dance slot open. We hit a couple in each state. We hit the Mona Museum, a museum of Native American history in Arkansas, and it's a unique animal because it's owned by Native Americans. So NAGPRA may or may not actually apply to them. And for anybody who is not aware, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act says that you can't have any human remains, and most of the grave goods have to be returned to the appropriate tribe for reburial and repatriation. So most of your displays nowadays are bare. But it is what it is. And then we went into Tennessee to Pinson Mounds, which is a unique collection. It has mounds from the earliest Adena up through the latest Mississippian. So it was a constantly occupied site because of its location, partly for the line of sight communication, but also access to river. All the same criteria I used to explain how to find the fortresses in Indiana. And then we went across the state to Old Stone Fort, Tennessee, and it has been declared by the archaeological community of Tennessee to be a ritual and ceremonial site. There was nothing fortress about it. So we go in, we find the remains of stone walls all the way around 52-acre site with a single entrance, and the entrance, which is a rectangle probably 20 feet long, 8 feet wide, with a very narrow door at the inside end. And in between all that space, inside that rectangle, was debitage from tool making, as in arrowheads, that was 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. Someone had made probably hundreds of thousands of stone tools, projectile points in that spot, but it was ritual only. So yeah, that's the kind of thing we get into on the show. And then we went from there to Welsh Caves, and another cave in Alabama that didn't really have great access and was pretty much closed, and hit more museums, and Pilot Mountain, home of right up this road, home of Andy Griffith, ate at Aunt Bee's Cafe. Pilot Mountain is a large, you can see it from 30, 40 miles away without any binoculars. It's sticking up out of the earth that high. And it's a pedestal style stone. We found, I think, I'd have to go back and look at my notes. I think we found 7 different seats looking in 7 different directions, where you would sit and watch for these line of sight signals, or sit and send them if you were so equipped. One of those seats even had cup holders.
Wow.
Some dude, yeah, somebody intended to sit there a long time. And it pretty much blew my knee out making that climb. And then the next day we went to Yoli's, and I couldn't climb the mountain to look at the stone cairns on her place. But
I know there's been some people in the Bigfoot field and stuff. There's a guy named Kawani Laparatus that's been along for a while. He claims that there's a regular kind of breed of Bigfoot, but then there's like another type that's a lot different, maybe more human, and he calls them ancient ones and tries to tie them into weird, civilization stuff. And I don't know. I know there's a lot of craziness with that subject on many different levels, but I know I've seen weird, like old paintings and stuff of like weird hairy people, and I don't know if it was I think it was the Bible, like weird stuff, and they they didn't look ape like, but they just seemed kind of like normal people, but a little extra hairy. And I know there's some stories
And
like
a little
that.
extra large too, Joshua for one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a number. There are a number of historical accounts, not just biblical. For instance, Gilgamesh's friend Enki was large and hairy and semi-immortal, as was Gilgamesh. But yeah, there are a number of accounts in historical records of large, erudite individuals, and some of them apparently were quite eloquent speakers, well, better than I'm doing right now. But you also had the hairy men from 1130 who attacked the whole monastery and just almost brought it down, throwing stones on the roof. And that siege went on for days. I have a siege going on out here. My dog hears me talking.
It's okay. I have dogs and pigs and stuff running around, all kinds of craziness. It happens.
So yeah, I have. I'll go with experiences indicative of Bigfoot activity, vocalizations, paths with stuff thrown across them, that kind of thing. And there was, and I haven't been able to find it for years. There used to be a recording of a vocalization that was very clear. It was Yucca Mountain region, which is, kind of nothing out there to hide under. But when you played it, all the dogs would go crazy. Some of them would just cower in fear, but the rest would bay at it.
We've had Ron Moorhead on not too long ago with some of his voice stuff. That's pretty interesting. But you have to wonder with some of this stuff if it ties into some of these like super civilizations somehow. That subject that we're talking about, Bigfoot, on some level, somehow. I don't know exactly how, but somehow it does. I think. Especially if you tie
and I'm the science guy. The interdimensional thing, the mental manipulation, those that make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. That one I go with. The feeling watched, yes, and a few other things indicative of something that is supernatural. But as far as the natural, the science part of it, there are many things that could be done, have been done, but need to be done better. DNA studies is one example. Ketchum has done some studies, but she didn't do as good a job as she should have with the evidence trails, etc. Not that the DNA studies bad, just the evidence trails bad. Other things like that. Jeff Meldrum, he's done great work. He's not getting published, and I don't understand why. His work is good enough to be published, but it's not being published. Another thing about Bigfoot, the DNA that Ketchum got said it was half human. So you figure that one out. I can't.
Yeah, definitely interesting for sure.
Well, Rick, since you just brought up so some of the more of the traditional late night talk radio topics, you are also a hollow earth enthusiast. Do you want to, well, we have like 15 minutes or so left, 10, 15 minutes.
About About 7 minutes.
Oh, okay.
My, how time flies.
Yeah.
Oh, the whole Hollow Earth story in 7 minutes. Let me see if I can do this.
Well, yeah.
Yes, the
it
Earth
needs
is hollow. Let me put it that way.
it needs brought up because it's you're
Yeah, I spent a lot of years researching and
multi-talented.
promoting that whole thing. Yes, I did. And the site, the new HollowEarthInsider.com, is still out there, or it was the other day. And on it is 20 odd years of research, everything except that the chat files, they got destroyed. And Dennis Crenshaw is the one who started the new Hollow Earth Insider as basically a fanzine, and it was mimeographed, and he probably did mail it from different post offices the way things were back then. If you've ever seen the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson, Dennis was a taxi driver when he started all this. So that, I know that's a really bizarre esoteric reference, but you'll get it if you watch the movie. So the Hollow Earth Insiders got it started as a fanzine. Then we got it into the web, and we ended up doing Unraveling the Secrets, a blog talk radio show around everything and everybody that Dennis knew in the Hollow Earth theory circles. So I got busy and I did my physics thing about how the Earth not only could be hollow, it actually has to be hollow. For all of the other math to work, there has to be a void at the center of the Earth. And guess what? What is the gravitational pull at the center of the Earth?
Zero.
It's zero. That's right. Net zero. So, in other words, the mass that is around the center of the Earth is pulling away from the center of the Earth. So there has to be some void. It might be the size of a grapefruit, might be the size of the moon, although I'd lean much closer to the grapefruit. I got started on that. Actually, I found Dennis because I was researching for a novel about Hollow Earth. And
Yeah,
came
you kind
away
of have
with
Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne.
Yes. And a few others. Edidorfa is one, is my favorite, actually.
What is that one called? What?
Edidorfa. It's Aphrodite spelled backwards.
That's a movie?
I don't know if it was ever made into a movie or not. It was in 1894, published as a novel.
Oh, okay.
Was it a Jules Verne book?
No. I can't remember the guy's name.
I've seen The Land That Time Forgot lately. I know there's The People That Time Forgot. I need to watch that next. That's some weird ones like about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I don't know how much of my 7 minutes I got left. Hollow Earth is getting back to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh sent Enki to the Hollow Earth to find Gilgamesh's mother, who was immortal, who could restore Gilgamesh's immortality. But the oldest known written record of anything mentions Hollow Earth. So there you go.
It's in the Bible too. The people, bless the people who live in the earth. Or so I think it's in the Book of Revelation.
Well, and the ant people of the Utes and they all came from the Hollow Earth. Mm-hmm. And their origin story says that the natives came up through a hole from the Hollow Earth.
I think there's something to it, and I'm someone who's seen weird UFO and weird beings, so I think there's something going on, a lot more going on than people give it credit for. That's for sure. But definitely fascinating, and I don't really believe in the flat Earth stuff too much, but that's interesting. But they seem to get a little too kooky. Hollow Earth seems a lot more respectable, a lot more level.
Well, and if you go read I did a PowerPoint about the physics that defend the Hollow Earth theory, and you can find it by going to the HollowEarthInsider.com. It's in the side column.
I'll have to check that out. Very cool. Well, we got about 2 minutes. It's been an amazing show. Really good. I was up all night with a weird tooth bleed thing, so hopefully I don't have an infection or something. I have to go to a dentist. But I appreciate everybody carrying the show. It's been really good. Thank you so much. What's
Thank
your
you,
link?
guys.
Your links? You got any websites?
AmazonPrime.com/detail/Lost America.
Very cool. And that's cool that you've been in a magazine. What's the magazine again that you're in a lot?
Ancient American.
That's really
It looks
cool when
like
you're
it.
in a magazine. I've been in New Dawn, but not in a long time. I interviewed Brad Steger in New Dawn. That's my magazine stretch, but yours is more elaborate and a lot longer, it seems. But it's cool when you're in them. I like it. I have those magazines around here. I try to preserve them all the time. Be careful. But we appreciate it so much. Thank Rick. Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, Professor Wham. And everybody have a good weekend. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys. Thank you again.
Preston Dennett next week.
That'll be a
All
good
right.
one.
Take care. And let's see. In this Joker.